Round 6 starting here in Masters Tour Montreal online. Very important rounds because we're getting a good idea of not only how people will be faring in terms of getting through to that top 8, but also if you can get to 7-2, you get yourself an invite to the next couple of Masters Tours as well, in addition to a hefty chunk of prize money. So this is getting very important for these players at 5-0. They don't want to start dropping their matches now. And so for Lambi Series and Bard as our two competitors here, pressure is getting high. Do you think they'll be able to stand up to it?
Yeah, it's a tough one because Lambi Series at least has kind of an interesting lineup. He's gone quite heavy on weapon removal. He's also not bringing mage at all of either variety. I do say either because Highlander mage is not a deck, but he doesn't have Tempo Mage or Turtle Mage in his lineup. So you can see here Survival Druid, Weapon Rogue, and the Soul Demon Hunter. But there is a ton of weapon removal splashed around this. He has an Ooze and a Sticky Finger in his Warrior. He has Living Dragon Breath teched into his Druid as well for some of that anti-mage tech on the other side. But most interestingly about his Druid build is it's what I'm kind of referring to as the Open Cup build. We have seen it winning a few of the Open Cups to qualify for these events, but it's not really something that we've seen at GM level to this point, with the King Theoris double Survival of the Fittest build, which gives this kind of one extra board push with the King Theoris, which obviously can get you 10 drops from your survival, but also 7 drops from any dead guardian animals that you have in your hand, which actually can end up being quite important. You do quite often, I think you find one guardian animal's ending up stuck in your hand that you can't play.
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly reasonable inclusion. You know, he's cutting from some of the lists that are included the exotic mount seller package, and instead has an alternate way to generate a big board. Whether or not it's better on average is, of course, still yet to be decided, but the thought process, I think, is very strong there. On the other side, however, we have from Bard a pretty interesting build of Bomb Warrior with both the Pirate package, which seems to be kind of unfashionable in this Masters Tour, in addition to Kargath with a very, very anti-aggro build, I suppose you could say. But he also has managed to find room for Galakrond and Kronks in order to get a little bit of the more anti-control version of the deck. The thing that I am critical of this list is that in fitting in all those cards, he's lost all the weapon buff effects, which, in my opinion, are some of the most crucial cards in a lot of matchups.
I agree, yeah, he's lost a lot of weapon synergy. He's missing Upgrade, he's missing Cutting Class from some of the lists that we've been seeing. He does obviously then replace that with Battle Rage potential instead, since he's playing the Risky Skipper package. But very, very interesting build of the deck, and we will see how it pans out from here. And that Risky Skipper package might come in particularly clutch in what looks like will be his opening matchup here against the Weapon Rogue, as it does, despite being very heavy on weapons with that Self-Sharpening Sword and Hooked Scimitar, it does still rely on a lot of those 1-health stealth minions for some early damage getting through.
It does, yeah. This was a pretty steep learning curve for me in terms of the Weapon Rogue, because my first instinct, of course, was to say, okay, this is an aggro deck up against Bomb Warrior, which has, like you said, the Pirate package, a lot of armor gain, even like double Quartermaster for Bard thrown in there as well. It should be really good. But I was slowly coming to realize that Self-Sharpening Sword, any kind of weapon buff that goes on that, it very quickly becomes an anti-warrior list. Like, it's a very strong counter to Bomb Warrior, because you just kill them. The Warrior doesn't have enough armor gain. Do you think Bard's list with the Kargath, the Quartermasters, and the Risky Skipper Armorsmith package can gain enough armor, or is he going to have to go on the aggro plan?
I would doubt it, right? Because sure, the Kargath might help to some degree, but we just talked about how he's cut some amount of card draw, right? Like, he has the Ankar and the Battle Rage, but he is replacing Corsair Caches with it. So, you know, he still has to play Kargath, get it dead, then draw through his deck to find the prime on average, however long that takes, which could be a significant amount of time. I'm not sure Bard's Rogue will necessarily give him that much time. It's kind of situation where, you know, I looked at this on instinct and was looking at Lambi Series list and was like, wow, he has Ooze and Sticky Finger in his Bomb Warrior. Like, that is unforgivable tech carding from Lambi Series. But actually, if you would reverse the situation here, those weapon destruction cards could end up being pretty useful if Bard were to have them in his deck, but he does not.
Well, getting things going in our first match of the day. Like I was saying, all of our competitors trying to get through to that top 8 to be played out tomorrow, where they're trying to get their fair share of the $500,000 and that spot in GM for both of our competitors here. And Lambi Series already looking like he's got himself a premium hand here. It's got the sword, right? That's what you want in the matchup.
Yep. One man's got a sword, the other man's got a wrench. Let's go.
The pleasure is
See, you played Wrenchy Swordy before.
Home in the shadows.
Very slow-looking hand so far, and this is the ultimate problem. I totally agree with your point of when you play against no weapon destruction, self-sharpening sword can just carry solo a lot of the time. But this is the alternate problem, where even if you do have the skipper package, it still takes quite a long time to set that up, right? Like, you quite often have to draw Ankar and then use that to get through to your risky skippers, then have alternate minions to go with it as well. So if the rogue is able to get a 1-2 of stealth minions in the opening turns, don't really play super efficient ways to deal with that. It's still like armor up shield slam, or it's blade storm, or it's heaven forbid swing your wrench caliber into one of the minions to remove it from board. Like the level of efficiency of dealing with these 1 health minions just isn't really there for the builds of Bomb Warrior these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty clear from the way I was talking about it that I am left somewhat confused by Bard's build of the warrior that he's got here. But this is a hand that could get the work done. You know, Wrench Caliber in hand means he can go a little bit aggressive. Should he find himself a Blastmaster Boom, this is the hand that I think could bridge the gap to that point.
This hand is inhuman from Lambie series. He has everything he needs already.
Yeah. Absolutely disgusting. I mean, the only question I had was, with double Secret Passage in hand, do you ever play 1 on 2 to hit another 1-drop? Which, you know, with 4 cards being drawn now instead of 5, it was kind of unlikely, and the dagger is not that bad anyway. So I think, without getting too fancy, I do like the way that Lambie series has been approaching this.
Yes, I very much agree.
I mean,
it's a little awkward though. First turn with some floated mana does feel slightly awkward for the first time.
Yeah. Crimea River comes to mind as the phrase I would use here. Yeah, it just means next turn, Krastanov, if anything is played. If not, I mean, just throw down. You can go Cutting Class with the Volpyra. You can even just go Eviscerate Face if you want at this point.
Yeah, just chuck the Avis if you don't pick up anything else off the card draw. Seems absolutely fine, since you have double Secret Passage to then look for the second one over the next few turns. Yeah, this is it, right? This just isn't a good feeling. In no world is this a good feeling.
Is that better than just Risky Skipper Quartermaster on that turn? I know that it gets cleaned up by the weapon there on the backswing, but like, he developed nothing and had to swing his weapon into a minion here.
He did, I agree. My suspicion is that he really wants to pair together Risky Skipper Armorsmith or Risky Skipper Battle Rage in particular. With no Ankar in hand, he doesn't necessarily have access to a second Risky Skipper anytime soon, so there's a lot of draws off the top that could potentially activate that Skipper for a lot of benefit.
I guess at this point, something has to go fortunate for him, right? Whether it be drawing the Armorsmith off the top or your opponent having a dead hand. So I can respect it. Ship it.
Chuck that Avis.
That is going
you have an
one
Avis,
place
your
in this
opponent
matchup.
has a face. Let's solve for X. Yeah.
My man. Oh, and I mean, the question very rapidly becomes for Bard, so what if you hit the Armorsmith at this point? Like, it's not actually winning him the game anymore.
Right. That's probably the best pull, though, off the Faceless Lackey. I guess Titanic Lackey might have been superior, but it's a lot of board presence here to go along with the Shield Slam, Quartermaster. I think this is the other upside to not taking the skipper line. Okay. The other upside to not taking the skipper line last turn, because he immediately paired his Quartermaster with one of his Shield Slams, whereas if he'd have played his Quartermaster last turn, Lambie would have just smacked him in the face and removed all the armor.
That's another good point, yeah. I guess this hand does kind of require some burst armor. Especially when your opponent is hitting you for 6 and then 7 and then 8 on 3 subsequent turns.
Yep. Okay.
This will break your bones.
Bard looking for Titanic Lackey here, probably does not find it. We can see the sap in Lambie series hand, but that is a one-of in his list, I do believe, so Bard might be feeling like Titanic Lackey could have been his route out of this there.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, the question for me was, do you ever go for Draconic Lackey purely to hit Evasive Draconid on 7, like to buy you extra life? Like, you have to trade away the 4/4 there, but, you know, this hand, again, it needs something to happen right now, and you're pretty much banking on Armor Smith and only Armor Smith to pull you out of this on the next turn.
Well, he could have still Shield Slam and skipped the 2, right? That was the other way he could have done it if he wanted to preserve his 4/4. But yes, big sacrifices either way.
And while Millhouse is a great generation off the Lackey, when you're forced to play it again, it looks a lot less tempting.
A conundrum.
Crimson Hothead, but nothing to activate the spell burst currently in hand on this turn alongside it.
Oh, I mean, I'm way past that at this point. I'm in Brightwing territory. I'm trying to figure out what he can get off that can possibly pull him out here.
Another Millhouse?
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it.
Seeing it either.
Make haste.
Okay, so if he plays Skipper first, he can save the Bladestorm mana. He then doesn't have to Bladestorm this turn. Seems fine. There's the Hothead.
Trade Hothead. Dead.
But he's dead. Yeah.
Yep. All an exercise in futility is Lambie series with the Weapon Rogue, not the most popular version of Rogue by a long stretch. Getting the job done, and one big benefit of it here is I think you can get away with not banning Warrior. That I think a lot of players have been trying to figure out, can you build a lineup where banning Warrior is not the way to go? And so far, it seems like if you have been able to come up with that strategy, you're rewarded, because Warrior does have that very low win rate we were looking at the start.
Yeah. Just looking at the end of that game, though, I think it was a that was left remaining. I think it was, right? It was the final charge. So was it Corsair, was it Ankar first into Sky Raider into Bloodsail Corsair? Was that the best possible out on that turn? That's like, it seems like the highest odds to me at that point.
Okay.
Just to remove the 1 point of final durability. It only occurred to me as he then played the Ankar and swung at the end of the turn. He did end up hitting Risky Skipper, so it wouldn't have mattered too much. But I think that was a possible out he could have looked at that turn.
Yes, he would have had to clear the board, but I think that was all just about possible with the mana he had available.
With the Skipper as well, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Okay. I suppose that's probably a slightly more likely route, because Bard's route, I think, left him approaching 0%, even with the perfect dragons that he could have taken there. Either way, you know, it was slim to no chance of being able to take that one back. As Lambie series goes with a surprisingly similar archetype. I'm not going to compare it to Bomb Warrior this time, Sottle. I'm going to compare it to Weapon Rogue this time. Because it is a deck that equips these weapons and hits your opponent in the face. Obviously going about it in a bit of a different way. It's got a slightly more leaning of a control package compared to the Weapon Rogue, of course. But still, I think, preying on a lot of the same archetypes.
Embrace the chaos.
Yeah, and certainly, like I've practiced this deck with you quite a lot for Grandmasters, and Derek is the most relentlessly aggressive Demon Hunter player I have ever seen in my life. He has blinkered vision. He simply does not see minions unless it's the card Blade Dance. That's the only card in his deck that is able to interact with minions the way Derek plays this deck.
And I'm still convinced I'm right. I basically never want to trade with this deck, because the thing that I always talk about is the difference with this deck is it has a finite amount of damage, not only in the deck as a total, but in the part of the deck that you will see before the game is over. Because the draw engine is not that extreme in Demon Hunter. Most of the lists aren't running Spectral Sight. It's really just Skull of Gul'dan, Pantharas that are your main draw engines. And you're not likely to see over the course of a game that much more than like 40 damage if you're being generous, I think.
And Lambie series, at least in the immediacy, seems to agree here. Zero thought about trading that turn, had the value trade on the 1-2, did not take it, just shipped the 2 damage to face and let Bard work it out instead.
Gotta say though, it's looking like a pretty premium hand for Bard here. He's got plenty of ways to develop onto the board. He's got plenty of ways to hit face as well.
Love it.
I love this. I love
Derek
this.
is a happy boy right now.
This is what I'm saying. Lambie series is just a cool guy. You just want to hang out with him because he's the kind of guy that ships the one.
you just want to hang out with him because he's the kind of guy that hits you in the face. I'm not really sure this like logic quite follows, Derek.
He's got that vibe. He'd never do it, but you know.
Ah, gotcha. Well, he very much is doing it right now.
Lamby Series is the worst player I've ever seen in my life. What was that?
Oh, knew it was coming. Knew it was coming.
Yeah. Obviously, with no weapon destruction, though, there's just not really any need to hit face with no other weapons in hand on that turn. It's coming eventually.
Yeah, and also, he has double Blade Dance in his hand, right?
Yeah.
So I think the longer he can preserve this 4 free damage on his hero to actually be able to set up a powerful Blade Dance, I think the better here. So I think this actually seems pretty reasonable in this scenario. He knows there's no weapon destruction, he doesn't currently have another weapon in his hand that's conflicting, and he has double Blade Dance, which incentivizes him to hold on to weapon charges for that 1 extra turn. So that's all he was doing. I think it's absolutely fine now.
Yeah, I agree. And now there's a weird balance here for Bard, right? Because on one hand, he wants to go for the aggressive route. You know, he's re-equipped the bomb here. He's got a couple in the deck. Sorry, re-equipped the Wrench Caliber, a couple of bombs already in the deck. But at the same time, he needs to be the player who is playing a bit more defensively, I think. With all the armor gain he has available, he's going to have to find that middle ground between aggressive and defensive at the same time.
And it is a pretty difficult matchup to get your head around as well, because you know both decks are fairly similar, but they do kind of have both strengths and counters towards each other, where both decks are kind of a little bit vulnerable to just constant damage being shipped into their face. It's why the Bomb Warrior mirror itself is quite turbulent as well, for example. But the Warrior has huge amounts of burst armor gain, but Lamby Series on the Demon Hunter also has the ability to have huge lifesteal swings with the Eldraki Warblades, so it can be a very, very difficult race to calculate when it does come down to a race, which it inevitably does in most iterations of the matchup.
As I was saying at the end of the first series yesterday, I am thankful that you made the mistake of thinking that Lawkeeper Polkout here is anything other than a Yeti, because with the bomb being shuffled in, it is just going to reshuffle the deck to the original order, because if you hadn't realized that, I would have made that mistake right now. I very almost did. I caught myself at the last second before I said something very stupid.
Can I also clarify that I did make that mistake and then immediately correct it myself for the record? I just want that to stand, okay?
There was a message from Abar in our chat. Don't know if you saw it or not, but the evidence is there to the contrary.
Wait, what? Oh, yeah, he did. Oh, you're right. I actually didn't see that. All right, fine. I'm just a moron, Derek. Are you happy now?
There we go. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Again, well, it almost did stack the deck in the right order because, again, for those of you unaware with the interaction, any card shuffled into the deck completely shuffles the deck. The order is no longer top to bottom now. But he manages to get himself Skull of Gul'dan anyway, which is a pretty premium card to find to get that cycle rolling.
All right. Business time coming together here for Bard. Double Skipper, Armorsmith. Very clean clear with the Bladestorm.
Yep. Going to be a close one for both players here. Lamby, even on the previous turn, it was kind of interesting to see him go for the Lapidary at all, because it did present a threat which had to be cleared. And I believe with only one Soul Fragment left in his deck, Skull could very possibly have shut down the Lapidary for the following turn. But it comes at the potential downside of having a locked Skull if he gets something big like a Sociologist Militia here instead.
It's very true. I don't think this is necessarily an obvious decision here either. Just having a 1-1 in play now for mana efficiency versus the extra proc on one of your risky Skipper Armorsmith turns in the future.
I will still find you.
That's a good point. Even the pick wasn't obvious. Like I was kind of tempted towards just slamming Proto Drake. Like it's very, very hard for the Demon Hunter to deal with that. If it gets one hit, you're in a good spot. All right, now we're talking.
It's kind of looking like go time to me.
So if he trades in the 1/1 first, he can go Risky Skipper Armor Smith, which would give him 3 activations and thus kill the Kayn. But that's not necessarily the way to gain the most armor, because that would mean obviously playing the Armor Smith last.
Yes. It's also a turn where he can try and fit in the Horde Pillager, potentially even without swinging if he feels like he really wants
That's
another a Wrench Caliber to come back.
That's a really good point.
But that then makes clearing the Kayn efficiently a lot more awkward.
So then it could be Armor Smith trade, Risky Skipper, Horde Pillager. It gets him the 3 activations, and gets him the maximum amount of armor. His board would be almost entirely dead.
Alright, this is smart.
Okay, I like
Actually like this. This does both things, right? He doesn't. There's actually no reason why he has to play the double skippers first when this does the job. This fits everything in that we were talking about, but also gains significantly more armor off the Armor Smith since it was there initially. This makes
Very
sense.
good spot. Yeah, I like this line a lot. I think you're playing everything from the left-hand side here, right? You can get away with Blade Dance and Slice Skull.
If you don't want to play Second Slice this turn, yeah, seems fine. No real reason to, since you have the second Warblades in hand already.
Exactly.
Okay. It's also going to lose him a discount on this next card. And that's a card he'd probably quite like to have had discounted.
Yeah, for sure. He's still racking up a lot of damage on the following turns. It's looking okay for him, but with Deathwing off the top, that has to be a pretty high priority play, right?
I'm also, yeah, a little bit confused why he didn't just want a 12/12 that turn.
Demon Hunter with double Blade Dance already played.
Right.
That doesn't die. He's not even running Magtheridon in the list. There's literally nothing that kills that.
Right. Giant Sociologist would be the one thing, but I don't think the Sociologist is anywhere near big enough to challenge a 12/12 right now, is it?
Pretty sure there's none in the deck until he plays the Marrow Slicer.
Yeah, it's green.
Yeah. Little defensive, I think, here for my liking. Like, you can make the read that Kayn has been played already, so this Taunt will soak 6 damage at least. But even then, you can expect it to do that at some point after you've hit them for 12 damage.
Lambie just gonna full cash out here so the damage can go face, protect 4 from his own face. Makes sense to me. Imagine Gladebound is coming down here as well. It's a little awkward because I think he would have liked to have got Warblades down potentially and started re-healing again.
Interesting. I mean, I was kind of looking at just going Hero Power Panthara there to get extra card draw rolling. I guess having the body of a 6/4 on board is worth quite a lot at this point. Last Master, I think, isn't looking too impressive, with 4 bombs shuffled into the deck at this point.
Two have been drawn though, right?
Yes, but he's swung 6 times altogether.
Swung 6 times, so there's still 4 left.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I take that back. A very impressive Blast Master Boom. He could even potentially just try and hit lethal on this turn.
Wow.
Make haste.
It's interesting, right? Because I guess he's thinking he wants a turn where there's less health on the board to take the Blast Master out, so he can then get a more guaranteed lethal. Which he leaves himself a little bit vulnerable to the threat of the Eldraki Warblades in hand, like healing up and pulling Lambie out of range and setting up a counter lethal. But there is still a 12/1 that needs to be dealt with, and Bard has already seen 1 of the Warblades being used, which means the second one is unlikely. But this is now the nightmare scenario for Bard, where the top deck cut does come for the 12/1, and Lambie does now have healing options. It's just whether he's going to be willing to sacrifice that extra damage from the Marrow Slicer.
Oh, that changes things.
You don't pick the ones.
Yikes.
Okay.
nothing card there.
Yeah.
It only gains him 3 if he goes for the Warblades here.
Yep.
He's just going to take a turn. He's going to risk it. Stay at 9 health here, which is very, very much in range of just dying on this turn.
Yeah, let's go. We've kept count correctly. This should still be a full board, and it is. There goes the Blade Storm. Only 3 health worth of minions left on board. Whoa! Oh, it didn't take long. He put him out of his misery straight away. 4s everywhere from the Boombots, and Bard going to square that series up 1-1.
Yeah, I think, as we were saying, it could have been a slightly more aggressive line being taken. But even then, the 12-1 Deathwing that was left on the board at the end, on average, with both Blade Dances gone, 1 Shard Shatter missed as well, there was a reasonable chance that that had to be attacked into with the face there. So alternate lines there for Bard, and a defensive approach to it. But to be fair to him, he's built his deck in a very defensive way. It has that extra armor gain, which means you can just outlast most of the Demon Hunter damage.
He has, yeah, indeed. I still like just playing the 12-12 there, personally. But I might be being a bit of a hypocrite here, because I know, like, A-Bar spectates me playing against Demon Hunter with various decks and shouts at me to play more aggressively. And I generally do tend to play a little bit defensively against that deck and outlast them in a lot of situations. But I think it's quite appropriate that, you know, a big 12-12 threat there is probably game-ending in most scenarios. But we will move on now, and we're going to be seeing the Highlander Priest come up now, which Derek, I think, is now suddenly just as being one of the big terror decks early on. It does seem more and more people are moving to some variety of 2-Obs Priest instead.
Yeah, I mean, even then, there's much room for improvement. Like, we're talking about whether or not you have the Pyromancers, whether you include Galakron in there, whether you're including Elusha at all. But I do agree. I think this version of the deck, people are starting to realize, unless you're hitting, like, the exact Zephrys Raised Ed starting hand, most of the time, you would like to do the broken things more consistently, which generally, for me, revolves around the Cabal Acolyte, the Wave of Apathy, and also now Cabal Shadow Priest, which is making its way as a 2-of a lot of the time into a lot of the Galakron/Control Priests. But that's not to say that this deck cannot still do incredibly powerful things. The benefit of getting Zephrys when you have a Raised Ed already in hand is not to be understated.
Absolutely, yeah. I do love the fact that you can just bring cards that haven't seen play, classic set cards that haven't seen play in so long. You can just bring them flying back into the metagame as a 2-of just by printing a card as disgustingly powerful as Wave of Apathy.
I mean, it's like Cabal Shadow Priest is to Cabal Acolyte as Worgen Infiltrator is to Spy Mistress. It's just bad, but it's still just good.
Right. Yeah, it's a very good analogy. It's also the fact that Wave of Apathy specifically costs 1. Not because it costs 1, and obviously it would be worse if it cost 2, but because it costs 1, and every game of Hearthstone now involves you generating 15 1-cost spells, no matter what class you're playing.
Yeah.
Your head isn't as empty as it looks.
Yes, in time. There is very little information here about what you can make the read on.
Yeah.
I guess you just pick the one you'd like the most, which is probably Soulshare.
Agreed. Turns out it will be the correct answer here as well. He did have the opportunity for the free roll. Obviously, if he gets shown the generated card, that's always the correct answer, and he could have just picked a free card here, but no such luck. He is just going to have to take the guess. Wah, wah.
Well, he has a little bit of information at least. Whichever card he picked, which I didn't actually see what it was, he knows is not in hand, which is worth something, if not as much as a card in hand.
Right.
Reasonable little hand for Lambie. These removal cards like Shard Shatter and Soulshare I think are actually deceptively useful against Priest, because it's not just the kind of matchup where you can blindly go face every turn and hope to win. You do have to, I think, fight for board a little bit, partly because of the fear of Apotheosis, although that's lesser extent given that this deck only runs one of them. But it's also just because you're afraid of dying. The priest can turn on you very, very quickly if you just let them run rampant on board.
Yeah, very much agree. And I do like, on the flip side of that, I do like Bard playing enormous respect to the board there, just throwing out a Shadow Madness to not take early chip damage, because I do think Priest of most varieties does have the ability to outlast the damage from Demon Hunter, but that generally involves taking the absolute minimum amount of damage from minions possible. You kind of have to assess the game state. If you've kind of got beaten up by a few minions early on, you probably have to set up some kind of counter-offensive, stick like an 8/8 with an Apotheosis on it to just try and end the game that way. If you are able to just play full control all the way through the early game and not take minion damage, I think that does open a different door for you to be able to play full control and just outlast the damage.
Already, though, a perfect example of what can go wrong with Highlander Priest, because all these cards like Shadow Word, Ruin, Plague of Death, Forbidden Words, Kronks, in the other version, that's another Sethic Veilweaver, another Draconic Studies, it's another Wand Maker. Just anything you can throw down in the early game is worth so much in the matchup. You really want to be fighting hard for tempo.
Kane picked up as well. That's just more and more damage. In terms of the Warblades, no real threat of Murazond on this turn. No Dragon discount to be able to coin it out for 7.
The Spirit Jailer I do actually take some amount of umbrage with, though, because next turn is 7, which means, of course, the combo of Double Jump plus Skull of Gul'dan is something that Lambie has to be considering. Okay. And the 1/3 really doesn't feel like it's doing all that much. Like, in a one-off deck, you can't really expect exactly Cabal Shadow Priest to come down.
Yeah.
But I just think the extra Soul Fragments in the deck here don't warrant the benefit of a 1/3 on board.
It's fair. I definitely agree with that. I think it's something that you do have to be hyper aware of in matchups, particularly where Skull is important, which I think Priest is definitely pretty high up on that list, where you try and manage your Skull as efficiently as possible. And Lambie's kind of done the opposite here, with a lot of Soul Fragments going into his deck for his eventual Skull of Gul'dan. Is he guaranteed the Skull with his list, though? Does he play any... Doesn't look like he plays Consume Magic, no Spectral Sight. Yeah, it looks like he is.
Yeah, no I-Beam. None of that nonsense that sometimes creeps its way in.
You don't pick the ones, see?
Lambie's not out of the woods yet. Bard's still very much in this. The fact that he has the Broom Apotheosis combination in hand this whole time, as long as he can stay outside lethal range for a few turns, like even if it just ends up being Kronks that comes down with the rush, that can end up being pretty disgustingly powerful. With coins still held onto here as well, that happens just that one turn quicker.
Yeah, that would be pretty nuts. He's not running Siamat, so, I mean, weirdly enough, Kronks is like the best minion in his deck to stick the Apotheosis onto that he can stick down on the same turn. That's a lot of damage.
It is. It's exactly the kind of Demon Hunter hand that you can have an accident with against Priest as well, because there's a good chance that this goes Warblades, Twin Slice, Chaos Strike as well, which is absolute Murazond food for your opponent.
Well, if Lambie Series does want to go to APAC GM, he'd fit right in with that kind of play, because I saw that so many times already, where they play all the buffs and Warblades on the same turn, and then just instantly Murazond to them lose.
So you're saying he should do it? That's how you become an APAC GM? Is that where we've got to?
I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
Okay.
I will say again that on that turn, with this kind of hand, maybe I'm going too aggressive here, but I really want to start fitting in the hero powers there. And there's obviously a chance here that this 1/3 gets the same amount of damage in. Like if he just goes Coin, Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, for example. However, there's a reasonable chance, of course, that it just dies, and then that's one less damage that you've shipped through to the face on this turn.
Right. So next turn, just in terms of straight-up damage, Lambie has 2 from the Warblades, 3 from the Canes, 5, 4 from the Twin Slice, 9, Chaos Strike, 11. Still has enough to fit in the other Twin Slice as well. I believe he's actually 1 off here. Marrow Slicer change that?
That's just more damage than what the other cards give him, right? Oh my goodness.
Hello.
Poor. That's 6, 10. Is it just off?
I think it's mana off, yeah.
7. He's got +8 here, which is 15. And then up to 16. No, he can fit in the hero power. That's exact lethal.
You can fit hero power? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. Twin slice, hero power
13,
is 16.
15, 16, yep.
He's found it. Whew.
Well played.
Oh, Bod's going to be kicking himself here because obviously Apotheosis held in hand. He didn't play it and trade there, and he is exactly dead because of it. The plan was obvious, like you were saying. He was setting up for the Kronk's Apotheosis and Broom combo all in one turn. But it was just that little bit too greedy. We can talk about averages and how that may have been the best play for him to actually win the game rather than just survive. But in how it worked out here, it was the losing play.
It was. I think I like it, though. Like, I'd have to break down the numbers quite a lot to give you a definitive answer, but before the Soul Shard Lapidary was drawn off the Chaos Strike, Lamby's entire hand was damaged. Like, he had an above-average amount of damage in his hand, I'd say, and I don't think it was lethal at the start of the turn before the Lapidary was drawn. So I think, with that in mind, you probably survive against most hands there and then get a much bigger swing potential off the Kronks with the rush on the turn afterwards. So I think I'm okay with it, but it did give us a very spectacular ending to the series where Lamby Series was able to piece it together with the Soul Shard Lapidary. I'd love to have known what he did that turn if he didn't have lethal, though, because, again, he could have fallen into a trap that wasn't there with the Murazond on the other side and the amount of damage that he had to throw, but he didn't end up having to worry about it.
Yeah, it's a brutal play there, Bard. It's the exact kind of play that you go to your practice group after and be like, please reassure me, tell me I'm good at the game. That was definitely the correct thing to do, wasn't it? Because I feel so stupid right now.
And then the sycophants that you've surrounded yourself with just all go, oh yeah, absolutely, 100%, you're the nuts, you just got unlucky. Yeah.
That's my kind of group.
Yeah.
Well, Druid lining up as the last deck to take a win with here for Lamby Series before he could go up potentially 6-0 in a great spot already just to try and get to that at least 7-2 record, which that alone would put him in a decent spot to try and start fighting for APAC Grandmasters, as we were saying. And he does have this unique build of the Druid here with the classic Survival of the Fittest package, plus King Phaeoris as the spicy.
Yeah, double Survival of the Fittest as well, which of course does make sense when you're going to be playing King Phaeoris, when you want that extra 10-drop spell in hand. But no Kael Thus to cheat them out, no Omu, which some people have converted to just be playing that in non-Malagos Druid. Because of a recent change that was hidden in the patch notes that even I didn't know about until it appeared on Twitter last night with a few people talking about, which makes Omu a little bit more appealing because of the... they say fixed interaction between Omu and Innovate, but I thought it made perfect sense before, so what do I know? But there we go.
I thought it also made sense, but yes, it won't even come up this series, so no matter here. I'm not seeing the point of going Lightning Bloom Overgrowth here, because you get down the Guardian Animals on the same turn.
Yep.
I mean, I'm the kind of player who, unless I'd been specifically told that you go Lightning Bloom Overgrowth on 2, I would never have done it once in my life, because it still just doesn't make sense to me. Even though I know it's correct, I still think it's wrong.
Fair enough. Any merit to spending the 1? We're down here on Bard's turn, but I can't look away from that 1 out of 3 up there on Lamby Series side. He could have shot a Crystal Power at a minion. Does that ever end up being relevant?
Yes, it does, but probably not that relevant. Like, I think he's gearing up for a turn where he gets out at least 1 Lake Thresher, at which point these small minions on board are almost actively good for him.
Yeah. Very good.
Bard here in that kind of classic conundrum you have against Druid as Priest, where Sethek Veilweaver is definitely one of the better cards in the matchup, but only really for what it gives you. You know, you want to be making sure that you're hitting any kind of buff spell, Apotheosis, Psych Split, Grave Rune, and just throwing it down here where it's really not going to do much is something that I can respect.
Agreed. So Bard's just going to point out the big boy here into the Guardian Animal's turn, places it in the center.
It's the exact size that you really don't want to be walking into with a Thresher and a Twilight Runner, if that were the combination to be found. Oh, hey, what do you know?
Yeah.
Pretty good there for Lambie.
I mean, it is still significantly better than just, you know, not playing a big minion and then having the same thing happen, right? Like, you just have to kind of suck it up.
Okay, that's smart as well. I was looking at first glance at just taking the full clear there, but this is, on average, quite a lot better.
Yeah, I actually paused on the previous turn when I was, you know, I said he placed it in the middle when I was about to finish, you know, as is generally correct about against the cleave. But then I stopped to think for a second with actually on the Reborn minion. Actually, I think if Lambie Series gets a cleave, he will just attack far left in that situation anyway, which made me kind of double think what the positioning was supposed to be in that position. But I think you still probably put it in the middle.
I think so. Nothing especially powerful doing so far for Lambie Series. Like, obviously just getting the survival of the fittest played is fairly powerful. But no Ysera found, no Feoris found, no extra Guardian Animals found. He's not populating the board yet, which is the potential moment of respite that Bard needed. At least that was before he drew the worst card in his deck on this turn.
Yes. He essentially did not draw a card this turn, because I'm sure his intention was absolutely to just play Kronks as a 6/6 here previously to Lambie Series turn. I do like Lambie Series turboing out the survival, though. Again, I feel like kind of a broken record talking about Murazond all the time, but it's another important factor in this matchup. When you're playing a survival build, you either have to play it very, very early, as Lambie has here, so the Murazond can't come back and steal it, or play it in a position where you're threatening lethal, so your opponent can't just, you know, play Murazond and just happily take that huge buff on their own side, because that's quite often the way that Priest does win this matchup. They don't actually have to outlast the Druid. A lot of times they can just get a big tempo swing, and if you give them +4/+4 to all of their minions as well, pretty big deal.
So Bard taking the, I suppose, kind of sad development here, where he has 2 cards thrown down that really need a bit of help to get the value that they can unlock. But it's not that bad, as it turns out, against Lambie Series here. He's going to be very scared to develop this Teacher's Pet now.
Glancing, I would suspect, at deck lists, just counting all the ways that this can go horrifically wrong for him.
I mean, you can just take the double crystal power, right, to take out the Acolyte, and then it's very hard for it to go terribly wrong.
The problem is like there's kind of 2 must-kill targets on the board right now, right? Like, I was looking at double crystal power, but I was like, is it the Acolyte? Is it the Sethic? Like, there's so many different ways you could potentially get punished for this. It's a huge broom, though. That is an enormous broom.
Yeah. This seems pretty powerful as well if you can do this. Develop, I don't even know how many stats this is on the board. Set up for another survival, or more importantly, set up for Feoris. This is disgusting on the next turn.
Yeah. I can already tell this is Derek's I'm trying this on ladder voice. He's discovered a new toy that he's now very interested in.
Yeah, this is the exact kind of deck that I can just, after a hard day of talking about Hearthstone all day, play some Hearthstone all day as well, without having to think all too much.
Boom! 9/9.
Oh! Oh! Get Hippogriff, you noob.
Get Lepanomed, you noob. Lepanome off the crystal power? Is that not the definition of irony?
True. So, obviously the Shadow Word Ruin is what's keeping him in the game right now.
Yeah.
He just needs to try and figure out, what am I doing in addition to that? Because he's still losing, even after that disgusting 4-mana swing turn that he can pull things back around. How does he get the win?
Right.
Just kill the Hippogriff for 3 mana with Shadow Word Ruin. Sorry, with Shadow Madness in addition to the Ruin. Which isn't ridiculous because it literally doesn't hit anything else in the deck at this point unless you're, I don't know, able to snipe off one of the small dragons from Alexstrasza.
Lambie with the classic, he roped that reaction.
Well,
So, this is one of those turns where it does become a little awkward, right? Because Instinct says survival of the fittest, hit face, but then you're also potentially leaving up a minion for your opponent. You're not threatening lethal, so the Murozond can potentially punish you here. Lambie has no hesitation on the survival, but I think the trade consideration is somewhat real here. But he just has a 6/9 taunt.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think the big thing is not only Murozond here, but it's also Plague of Death, which you do have to worry about from your opponent, because there are a few cards that have been sitting in hand for a long time. And what this does is it develops a board that represents lethal on the next turn, and it also allows Guardian Animals to just be played after the Plague of Death next turn to, again, threaten lethal and repopulate the board. So I really like this line from Lambie.
Agreed.
Silence does work on Survival of the Fittest, doesn't it? It's not like Quest Rogue, where...
Correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was 90% sure, I just couldn't quite remember.
You're going to try and do this with rush minions? That seems ambitious.
Time is running out.
He can silence the taunt, but then he obviously can't... Sorry, he can silence the defender, but then of course he can't attack into it because it doesn't have taunt anymore as well.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a clear if he goes for 5 damage AoE and then Broom.
Chooses not to Broom, though. Just wants to take the 6. Okay. Likely to get Twilight Runner again here. Does not, though, but it's just another enormous board state.
Yep, absolutely demands the Plague of Death at this point for Bard to have any chance of staying alive in this series.
Yeah, holds on to his excess mana here. No reason to play it this turn because his mana is already allocated. Sequencing was correct, so obviously he doesn't want to draw additional beasts necessarily before he drops the Guardian Animals. So now, let's say he, top decks Ysera next turn, he can put the Dragon Portals in his deck and rip the excess mana afterwards. Good sequencing.
Yeah, there is the play of going for to exploit that line of being able to go Madame Lazul to hit the excess mana and then try and find Soul Mirror.
Oh, nutty. See the lines, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the best chance he has, right?
I do love a good study session.
Out pupils pretty
But
clutch.
this is fairly clean. All right, I like this too.
It's getting very close. There are not that many waves of threats left remaining in Lambie Series' deck. He has this giant Teacher's Pet in hand. I believe he has a Twilight Runner left. And then he, of course, has all the Ysera Portals. But all the Ysera Portals could end up running into a Plague of Death or a Soul Mirror.
That's true. That's true. If it lines up perfectly with Plague of Death and all the dragons die to Soul Mirror, then this is not over for Bard. Not 100%.
The Broom's just a 9/9 though. I just always fail to process that. Like, I'm pretty good at keeping track of how big everything else is, but then it's just, oh yeah, the Broom's also just a 9/9. Okay. Bard needs an answer right now, or he is out of this series.
Wave of Apathy? I think that's what he's looking at to have any chance at all.
One shot at it.
Oh! That's huge! They all have Rush as well.
They all have Rush, yeah.
Doesn't really matter all too much because you can't kill anything afterwards, but whatever, it's something.
What if?
You could, of course, Shadow Madness as well, but there's not really any way to exploit that because you can't kill them off.
We may just get another he roped that reaction coming out of Lambie series at this point. Yeah, I think he's already getting impatient with not finding out whether or not he's won this series at this point.
Oh, it's so close.
Time is running out.
Yep. Lambie is itching to get this series done with, but he's going to get some bad news in T- now.
Okay, this is kind of smart. This gives him the highest chance of stealing the minion he wants, which you'd have to imagine is the teacher's pet. It has the one. It does miss, I believe.
The Sarah though. Yeah.
Dance, puppet, dance.
It is simply the biggest minion in this scenario though, which might end up being relevant.
True.
Here come the dream portals.
Ooh.
They are so far unimpressive. Or Gidra I left unaccounted for. I wasn't considering the Gidra. That is enormous already, even without a buff.
Yep. Just a straight up 9/12 that you're looking at with the double +4/+4 buff.
Yeah.
Obviously can completely obliterate this entire board.
And drop the overgrowth on top of that, which I would imagine is more likely than the overflow. Overflow seems like a recipe for a lot of lost value in dream portals here if Lambie were to go for that.
Yeah, I agree. Gets him up to 13, which with a hero power takes out the Alexstrasza. Or I guess crystal power.
Yeah, crystal power, offensive crystal power, hero power, and then he can still push the 2 face if he thinks that's relevant. It likely isn't with the size of his board, so maybe just full trade to shut down options. He's going to.
I mean, you want to be at 30 health at this point, so I can understand. Wait, it was... I think that was a visual bug, actually, with the armor total there at the end. He was...
What?
Wait, what? 1 health. I have seen that before. I've sent messages about this where I think there's an interaction where after Galakron is played, the damage is dealt to the armor instead of or it's dealt to the health instead of the armor, but the armor still appears to be there.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I guess we probably should have been able to follow that because he had been taking damage on his face, so he wouldn't. There was no reason why he should have armor. But yeah, I just got completely mind blown that he just randomly died out of nowhere there in that situation. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the good way round, right? It's a visual bug. It's not a gameplay bug. It's not the armor was ignored. So it's the same kind of shakeout for Lambie series. There still takes the win and goes on 6-0. I think overall in that series, he was just playing pretty solid Hearthstone, nothing all too complicated. The real work for him came in his lineup, which so far, some weird archetypes being brought, some weird tech cards as well, but working out super clean for him. With, I think, the clutch decision being that weapon rogue, just having such a strong matchup against Warrior is a big kicker for him.
As you just saw, VK Lion, current global champion, is pick up another win there to go to 5-1, which is good news for me in one way because I'm a huge fan of her, and her victory is one of my favorite moments in Hearthstone history. But in another way, very, very bad for me because she is Dan's pick for this tournament, which means Dan has picked up some extra points in the caster draft. But still plenty of action left going on, I'm sure, Derek.
Indeed. I believe we are now going to take a look around the rest of the tavern to see what other matches we have going on in round 6. Still plenty of action to come here with the rest of round 6 and all the way through to round 9 to finish off the Swiss. So stick around here at Masters Tour Montreal online. Plenty more action yet to come.
Masters Tour Montreal Online is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network. T-Mobile.
Welcome back, everyone. We are going to be covering more of Round 6 of Masters Tour Montreal. I'm Raven, and joining me for this one is Frodan himself. And we've got some good matches, some good games coming up for you guys. And it's been a pretty crazy Masters Tour so far, right, Dan? Because we've seen a ton of different decks and archetypes and lineups as well.
Yeah, very much so. You know, we have seen some decks that I think people expected to do well, and they've been servicing appropriately. Like Priest, I think everyone expected to do pretty well. Maybe Druid, just given their popularity on ladder, and even Rogue. Demon Hunter seems to be one of those more interesting deck archetypes that are a little bit more controversial, but I think, you know, it's justified based off its win rate. And you can see that we're going to hop into Dravo versus Comic, where the Demon Hunter was banned. And I think that that's a really good adaptation based off what the trend we're starting to see here, Raven, as we take a look a little bit more in depth about who Dravo is.
Yeah, it's a player we've not seen tons of, or at least I have not before, you know, this weekend especially. Obviously, as you can see, he did a good run in Asia Pacific, considering he had a 0-2 start, did get that 7-2 finish. But what I really want to look at is not only the consistency of qualifying for all those Masters tours, which is pretty impressive, honestly, but also, you know, teammates with a player we have been talking a lot about, Gabby, and also a player we, spotlighted a little bit yesterday in the form of Cindo as well. So already, might be one of the lesser-known teams of the Hearthstone scene, across the world, but a team that's already starting to make waves, at least just in this Masters Tour.
Yeah, you know, for people who are, of course, football fans, it's really cool to see, you know, a lot of people get involved with Barcelona, or you can see SC Bastia. It's really fun to see all kinds of sponsors get involved in the scene where we're not traditionally thinking about it compared to some of the endemic esports organizations. So we'd love to hear it, and that's why you kind of really want them to do well, to be able to, you know, make their organization proud. So we're kind of seeing how Dravo's going to be able to maybe give another French player an opportunity to perhaps crack the ceiling of Grandmaster. As we take a look at their lineup a little bit more in depth here. Pretty standard Warrior, Druid, and Priest. Does seem to be those core 3 decks alongside Rogue for this weekend.
Yeah, and funnily enough, Dravo had a Turtle Mage banned out, so a deck that I think I'm going to go for at least a certain percentage of players just don't want to play against it, whether it's the correct ban or not. We'll just be like, I don't want to play against Turtle Mage today. That's getting banned out. But you are right, a fairly standard lineup for the other 3 decks, and what we've been seeing throughout the past few weeks of Grandmasters as well as some online cups as well. So not looking too bad here. He is 1-0 up in this series already. So we are going to be going in at that game number 2. And just a nod as well to the overall Swiss score. Both players 5-0. And we are getting to the point, even though it's 9 rounds of Swiss, where when you start to go 6-0, 7-0, you're pretty much like booking your spot into tomorrow, into the final day, right?
Yeah, very much so. So each win here feels like you're getting that much closer. The first few wins in Swiss feels like small steps, but these are long strides that could potentially be made at this point. So let's jump into it. We have Priest versus the Mage. You can see Comic already holding on to a dynamic duo of Sorcerer's Apprentice and Mana Cyclone. Going to look for more card generation. On Dravo's side, it's a little bit more open-ended. You could pretty much justify any combination of these cards. I think Cobalt Spellkin's probably the hardest, but at the same time, there's Draconic Studies, which allows you to tempo it out a little bit further. And you can see Dravo actually ends up going for the 4 Keep Freddy move and just ends up holding his whole hand.
Yeah, I mean, although I completely am on board with your point, Dan, if that was me, I don't think I would have 4-kept there, but we can see that there is potential of that payoff of getting the Spellkin early. I guess the idea is if you play Spellkin on 4, then he can Cabal Acolyte plus one of the 1-cost spells on 5 to really make that work and still retain the coin. My only worry with this plan is Dravo's keeping Sethic, but not even mulliganing for something to actually use it on if he wants to play it on curve, which we've seen a lot from Priest lately, to just drop Sethic on 2 and then follow up with a spell. He doesn't actually have the spell there, and a part of that is just not mulliganing for one. So we will see if that's going to be a hindrance or not in the near future.
Yeah, and I think that, you bring up a really interesting conversation point as Comic getting a very awkward hand. No spells to start things off, so it makes his first 2 opening cards in his hand pretty useless. But Sethic Veilweaver is a card that I think people feel obligated to get value off of, not realizing that it's kind of an important tool just to even develop something onto the board to give Priest plays. And so I appreciate the fact that Dravo is recognizing that sometimes Sethic Veilweaver, it's okay to go into River Crocos mode and just have a 2-3 on.
Oh, and I do agree. And the thing is, it's not even River Croc, right? It's a must-kill River Croc from your opponent's viewpoint, right? Sethic is not a card you want to just let sit on board. And we can see Komek didn't really have a choice about that last turn. And honestly, with the way this game is going, I partly expected Komek now to go Sorcerers, Ray of Frost on the Sethic into Mana Cyclone. It's not the best Mana Cyclone we're ever going to see, but it looks a lot better than like Ping and Wait, because when these mage players go for these, okay, it's okay, I'll sit back, I'll wait, and then I'll go off later. My worry is with these turns from Dravo, is there even going to be a later right now? It's looking pretty scary.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, which is, what is the payoff for Komek? A lot of times when you are in this position, you want to solve people, that ends up being really helpful.
That's not bad.
And a Rusher in the face of Corruptor,
okay,
which is really big. So that way he can use it to immediately trade onto the board and remove that Sethic Veilweaver. So nice pick up here from Komek. Although I will say that had he not found that, he would have been relegated to just play the Raz this turn, which would have felt really bad, or maybe use the Lab Partner and the Sorcerer's Apprentice Mana Cyclone. I can totally understand the incentive to greed because you really feel like you need a lot more high-impact spells to justify playing Sorcerer's Apprentice. Because if you do end up playing 2 Ray of Frost with Sorcerer's Apprentice, you're almost feeling like, why did I even play Sorcerer's Apprentice at that point? Because Sorcerer's Apprentice gave us 2 mana discount. Ray of Frost costs 2 to play. So these are some of the thoughts that are going through Komek's head, which probably incentivize him to hold back. But it's exactly how you describe, which is he's going to climb further and further behind. Because right now, Dravo has an opportunity to tempo this through Shadow Word, Death, and Remove, and develop every death off the Mind Vision.
Yeah, I mean, the real fear I had was just, what was the play if that wasn't Jandis off the top, right? Like, what actually is the follow-up? And then the turns generally only look worse. But I do, like I said, respect the holding off, and maybe it's something I don't do enough in my own play, because I play a little bit too fast with this deck sometimes, and we have seen players have a lot of success when they just hold, and then have one insane turn, instead of a few okay turns.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And so now Komek's reaching that tipping point where if he lets this board expand any further, it might be unsalvageable despite him having crazy powerful tempo swing potential through the double mana giant. So he's going to extend first Apprentice, sees a magic trick, which is pretty big. It should give him at least another playable spell. Oh, it tends to be an all 3 cost spell choice off of magic trick, which is exactly what Komek didn't want to see. Not to mention there are 3 secrets which are a little bit situational. Each of them have corner case scenarios that you want to really account for, but it's hard.
It's a double whammy, isn't it? It's not that they were all 3 costs, because if one of them was Arcane Intellect, I think Komek would be more than okay with that. But there were 3 secrets that none of them feel that good as well. I mean, I guess this Flame Ward is okay based on what the board looks like, but he simply can't play it this turn because he has to follow up with that Cyclone, which means the Flame Ward might actually end up being a little bit trash, because if this board gets traded into now, and then Dravo's either not playing minions or playing really big minions, then suddenly the Flame Ward might actually get stuck in hand a little bit for Komek there.
Yeah, and I think that Flame Ward is purely a card to potentially deal with, or just to kind of mess with Dravo, because I think out of the other 2, it's the hardest to activate, which will trip up the priest and maybe make them play a little bit more cards before they start to decide that it's Flame Ward. You know, Mirror Entity can be immediately diffused. Spellbender is actually a card that activates fairly often against priests, as they have so many things that target in their disposal. And so I think Flame Ward is a little bit of that mind games. It also has a side effect of, like, let's say Dravo finds a way to keep this board alive. It might end up clearing up the Fairy Dragon, which is a kind of a tricky minion to kill for mage, traditionally speaking.
This is looking a little bit tough as well. The Breath of the Infinite at first glance, it's like, oh, that looks clears off most of the board. It also clears off some of Dravo's minion as well, so it's not looking too good when it's not activated. So I think he will be fishing for something a little bit better to do to retain this board, because one benefit that Komek has of taking this a little bit slower is, against Priest, you normally only have to push them off the board once, and once they're off, the damage isn't flying your way, and then you can really sort of keep them off board at that point.
Wow.
Comic's still got a long way to go for now. I do like the spell damage steal, though. This is a pretty nice turn, actually, from Dravo.
Yeah, I was originally just thinking about Cabal Shadow Priest straight up, largely because if you have Cabal Cabal Acolyte, it's cheaper, which is actually a really big deal if you end up wanting to play more combo cards with in the same turn.
What to do?
But it also develops more power on the board. But I think this way he gets a full clear. Versus, I think if he chose to play Cabal Shadow Priest, he would have to like trade his Cobalt Spellkin, and it would die to Sorcerer's Apprentice. So I think this is totally fine, and Dravo is still very far ahead on the board. And this is kind of what we talked about with the Flame Ward, right? It's ended up being situationally pretty solid, and it does discount his mana giants, and it does set him up. But the problem is kind of how you describe, which is he still feels really far behind. And if Comic like plays Flame Ward and pings the Cabal Acolyte, then he's playing with the secret face up. There's no mystery about it whatsoever.
Right. And that's the tough thing, right? Flame Ward, again, in isolation, looks like a decent turn, but there's no follow-up, right? There's just no good follow-up whatsoever. He doesn't get to play more cards to then reduce down some of the giants more, because I don't think he'll want to just play a giant into this, right? This looks pretty terrible, because then the minions just trade into the giant, and that looks bad, and it sort of negates the Flame Ward anyway. So we did see the ping on the Cabal, giving Dravo some pretty good information about that secret, unless it's like the biggest bait ever from Comic. Wait, what?
Yeah, it'd be pretty next level if he chose to go for it. I mean, there are some cards to play around from Dravo's perspective, because he is playing more of that Highlander variant. So, you know, if he found a way to generate, say, Holy Nova, right, then pinging the Cabal Spellkin would actually be better. And Dravo's doing exactly what you should be, which is if you attack, you get 3 damage but lose your whole board. So now that Comic has given that information to Dravo, he's probably not going to attack for a little bit of time until Comic develops. And even if he does develop this double mana giant, chances are Dravo will be able to deal with it immediately because of the board state.
Yeah, this is like old explosive trap lessons 101, right? Don't just give your opponent a great explosive trap when they don't have a board, because if you play this weird game of chicken, where if you don't proc it, then if they play minions as a response, you get to trade your minions into their minions first and gain a ton of value from them. So it's just a nice little approach there from Dravo. I was worried for just a second when he played that he was going to trade into face, but he did go for this a little bit slower. And now that potion being used on the Mana Giant means that although it's weak as a 1-1, it's a fantastic Conjurer's Calling target.
Yeah, it's a good Conjurer's Calling target. I was kind of hoping to see Conjurer's Calling this turn. But I guess Comic was saying that Potion of Illusion is one of the harder cards for him to use. So I think I'm okay with that. Comic immediately goes for the card draw, though, with Arcane Intellect, because, I mean, at this point, he really needs to find better ways to utilize his Mana Cyclone, if he can. Or if he finds spell damage for the Raz, and he finds neither.
Yeah, in a weird way, Comic needs actual removal, right? He wants to maybe generate a removal tool, whether that's Blizzard, Flame Strike, something along those lines, because or even just a lot of one-shot effects. I am pretty sure, just glancing at it, just triple check that yeah, he isn't running Firebrands in his list either. So it's kind of funny that he's digging for cards to remove this board, because if he just plays minions, it's giving Dravo these good targets to actually put his minions into. But those are pretty good ones, Dan. Oh my!
Yeah, find the Arcane Destroyer keeps growing with each spell. Just think of it as Mana Worm got buffed and went to the gym. Then finds the Warlord, which leaves behind a Swamp Minion and has Rush. It's pretty powerful. And Dravo now has to deal with this, but I mean, he's got Mind Flayer to immediately copy one of these minions and then just remove the board.
Yeah, he just has Shadow Word Rune if he wants it. It's huge.
Yeah.
Can trade off, proc the Death Rattle, Shadow Word Rune still works. It's a 5/9 it rattles into. Again, it looked really good for Comic with those, the Conjurers were very, very high value, but Dravo's just batted it aside like it was nothing and actually gained from it in the long run. Crazy.
There are a ton of choices this turn, and Comic already has shown you 3 different lines that he can take. He can try to go for spell damage and Rats. He can try to use Devolving Missiles, which you could also play Chinvala. The Devolving Missiles to lead off probably is the best, and he hits the Mind Flayer, but also a couple of reasonably powerful minions also still stay out with the Crimson Hothead and the Knife Juggler, so has to deal with that. Finds Astromancer Solarian or Azure Explorer. I believe that's cheap enough now to play with the Raz, and that would clear off almost the entire board.
Yeah, I do personally like Azure Explorer a lot. Even pushing it into one of the top tier spell damage minions along with such as Solarian, because even just generating that additional card is huge. Just keeping the card count high. He did go for a Solarian, going for the Primes approach instead. It does still clear most of the board anyway. Just leaves that Hothead up with his play.
Yeah, for some reason I had the impression that there was a 3 health minion, but that's because the Mind Flayer was there, and also he ended up hitting it with Devolving Missiles. So this ends up making a lot of sense. Solarian Prime ends up being a win condition a lot of time, except for when Priest steals it, and that Shadow Madness is devastating, particularly because Dravo now also has a way to counter Komik's initial Solarian Prime getting it. Now
look at this.
Dravo's full control.
Who cares about Flame Ward when you have an Amet just making all your minions 7 health anyway? Suddenly the board's looking a little bit more foolproof against that Flame Ward for Komik that he stacked up a long time ago now.
Yeah, very much so. Now Dravo looks and sees a combination that he already sort of had an inkling of idea that was there. Komik played the same Mana Giant twice, so he wasn't exactly sure if there was a second Mana Giant, but he knew about the Conjurer's Calling second half. And Chenvala also gives him some information about what kind of turn he should be expecting. But I mean, his board is very sturdy at the moment, so Komik needs to get some really good resources off this generation if he's going to climb back into this game.
It is tough though, isn't it? Because suddenly there's just those 2 7 health minions he has to consider. At the moment, there aren't great ways to actually kill off this Amet. He's going to start with the Mana Giant into the Conjurer's Call and see if he can go again. And wow, as if to balance out the scales, Dan, one great Conjurer's Call in leads to one terrible one. As Sol would say, a 0-0 looking in the middle there, as the 12-12 doesn't count as a minion because it can't go face. And then just a 5-6 is not what Komik's after.
Yeah, you're always not really that happy to get these minions, but at the same time, Komik doesn't really have anything else, and he's also behind enough on board that maybe being on trade duty is totally fine, given that Priest usually gets really far ahead at this point.
It does help solve, or partly solve, the problem that honestly Komik's had all game, is that Dravo's just had the board from almost turn 2, right? He's just like never really lost the board throughout the whole game. Which has caused Komik quite the problem. So I guess the 12-12 is useful for dealing with the immediate problem he's had, but
yeah,
it's all on Dravo now to find some way to answer. He can just steal some of this anyway with the Cabal. He will have 7 health as well, which is a pretty nice bonus.
Yeah, the Cabal has 7 health. He could even use the Brute right now to rush it if he so desired. Ends up using the Conjurer's Calling instead. And very clever use of Amet with the summon, and now the worm has 7 health and it's untargetable. Very annoying. And now if you want to kill it, you just gotta attack with your Abyssal, and that's not really what Komik wants to target because there's a lot of other things he wants to kill. But let's see what he ends up getting off this Chenvala and card generation, because this is a turn that Komik's been holding for a while. He really needed that other Sorcerer's Apprentice, but the bottom 8 cards of the deck, and doesn't feel like he can wait any longer.
Nothing too impactful. Combustion does initially do the most damage based on board stay. I believe the Amet is, it is a 2-2, so he could aim it there, but there's so much health on the board now. Clearing it up seems like such a tough task for Komik to accomplish, even with generating a few spells. I think we might be in the range of discussing a potential prime that's needed from Komik here.
All right, so Komik.
Time runs out on me.
If he ends up playing Learn Draconic. So Learn Draconic and Brain Freeze and Mana Cyclone. I think that's something he really needs to consider, which is his hand is looking very light. in terms of like good play. So I think he wants to drop me as next turn. Doesn't end up doing it. Finds Flame Strike, Fireball, Arcane Missiles, Cram Session. These are reasonably playable cards, and it could be a lot worse.
Is this just a good Soul Mirror? He gains the Shambhala. He can actually kill off the Shambhala of his opponent as well. So it gets this 12-7 off the board, so he doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, he kind of needs to trade the Amit first because Soul Mirror and Amit actually interact with each other exactly how you think it would, which is it gives all of his minions 2 health. So he trades the Amit first, then plays the Soul Mirror, has 1/1 left in order to trade. It actually worked out really nicely because of his board space, because of the damage.
Yeah, and now suddenly, although Priest doesn't generally throw off a ton of spells, one, he's just gained the Arcane Missiles from the spell wing, sorry. So that's one spell, and although this Shambhala isn't generally going to get so much value from Priest's side, it is something Comic has to deal with, right? He has to be aware of that. If he leaves this Shambhala up, there is a chance that then another 5/5 comes out, and it's going to start really pressuring him on his end. He has drawn his Astromancer, though, his real one, because the one we saw earlier get stolen was actually a generated one from studies. So he does still have a chance, but maybe it's even to the extent where he has to consider if he can play the Astromancer and kill it off himself so it doesn't get stolen.
Yeah, I usually call that, Plan B. It's just
I think
you
we're
don't
at Plan
really
B.
want to necessarily kill your Solarian, but it might get to that point because Comic's running thin on some of these resources. Dravo's very cool, just playing control. Mage has drawn so many cards, finding other ways to generate damage, and if you just use the broomstick at the worst case scenario, this dragon is cleared.
And this is the point, right? And this is the problem. Comic's Giants are gone. The Conjurers is gone. The Jandis is gone. Okay, well that Conjurer's not gone. It must have been generated one earlier. The Jandis is gone. Like, there's not many ways of threats apart from what Evocation really that's really going to win him a game. So I do think he has to look at actually just getting that Solarian and maybe Conjurer's calling it just to make sure it gets shuffled in. He's got 5 cards left in his deck.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. Now finds the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Wand Thief might be able to help out. Needs to generate something. It just might be straight up puzzle box at this point. Primordial Studies might be able to find something really impactful if Comic can, I don't know, stick Malagos perhaps? Like, this is starting to get to the 1% cases in order to start bailing him out here. Interesting.
Got to look though, with no cards really left in the deck, there is the Evocation. We've not seen it, right? I've not been crazy and just missed an Evocation this game, which means if Dravo can steal this Astromancer, he basically has to beat an Evocation to win the game right now. Oh, Azure Explorer, great pickup. Those two are very good. The Shooter Scrolls on Azure means that it's just more and more value, more and more generation.
Yeah, very much so. I guess, like, from his perspective, he won't be able to stick minions like Malagos or even have ways to capitalize onto it because he only has Fireball and Arcane Missiles. His choice to leave up the Sethek Veilweaver is interesting, and it just kind of shows you the desperation that Comic's in. Normally, when you have a Sethek Veilweaver in this kind of spot, when resources do matter a lot, it is turned into the highest priority. A Code Red, mission critical removal. And, I mean, Dravo, you can see, is going to start destroying everything. He does have the Solarian Prime. He doesn't need it, though. That's kind of the interesting point. He can just totally play Breath of the Infinite here. Chooses to drop the Solarian Prime, and we're going to see if he's able to clear the board.
Well, that does mean that Comic's got one shuffled in now, so he does have one of his own to maybe fight back in the near future.
Okay. Pretty mediocre stuff, but, I mean, I guess the board wasn't super threatening, and for Dravo's perspective, this is his last AoE in his hand for the Wretched Tutor and the Breath of the Infinite, so he wants to probably save it in the worst case scenario, and even if he had a better play for that turn, his overall macro line is he needs to hold on to these things to make sure that there's no cheese coming out from Comic.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that was actually, in a roundabout way, the Prime was actually just Dravo's biggest threat on board that he could have played, which means that he has got a 7/7. He could have rushed it in if he needed it to with the Broom as well. But really, the secrets are just a nice little bonus of support there. But I think that was just Dravo saying, well, I have this Sethic that's probably going to stick with Embalming, and then I can just play a 7/7 with upside against this pretty minimal board state. So I think it was going to be pretty good no matter what happened there.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense to me. Wow, it's a lot of Arcane Missiles damage, but now activates one of the secrets, Netherwind Portal. Nothing really too big here, just a 4/4. Another Arcane Missiles.
Ooh, wait. Comic gonna lock in this evocation right now. The apprentice.
Yes.
Yeah, the apprentice is definitely nice. It does mean that he doesn't gain the max amount of cards, but that's obviously quite difficult to do.
Oh, immediately plays Arcane Breath, finds Power of Creation. Needs to kind of get these spells up.
I hope he finished his turn. Okay, got counterspell down, and he floated too. Okay, so he missed a ping. Obviously not great, but not the end of the world.
Right. And you also don't know if the secret is things like Flame Ward, so attacking face isn't always correct there from Komi. Even if we may know what the secret is, as Dravo picks up the Zephyrus, can immediately use that to clear off the board or the secrets, but probably best used as a nuke button in case the board gets too crazy with things like Puzzle Box that might get randomly generated.
Yeah, a small part of me was wondering there, like, how can he get his mana down low enough for him to force a flare from the Zephyrus? Because not only does it deal with the secrets a lot of the time, it does draw a card as well, but the fear factor of that counter spell makes it a little bit worse. And then also, if then you have to test for a counter spell and proc one, it also makes the flare worse, right? Because then suddenly it's not clearing as many secrets. So yeah, I do agree with you. I think holding Zephyrus there is actually pretty nice for Dravo and will pay off, whether it's to generate another big threat to keep on the pressure or to recover from a potential prime turn.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter for Dravo to with these secrets, right? At worst, the secrets generate like a 4-mana spell and stop your 0-mana spell or 1-mana spell. So definitely hold on to that Zephyrus. This is interesting though. Komic just picked the Pyroblast. He has Power of Creation and Fireball. Komic might actually develop an opportunity to find a win through just direct damage if Power of Creation finds chargers like the Reckless Rocketeer. So I am intrigued if Komic can find some last-ditch effort to potentially turn around this game, because it is looking very much like Priest is going to run away with it at this final stage here. It doesn't look very closely contested. Priest is still almost at full life. However, if you look at the amount of damage, Komic might almost get there. The question also becomes, does he have enough health and time, because he's been falling further and further behind on the board.
Yeah, and that's the important part now. There's Fireball, there's Prime Blast, the Power of Creation, which can get you some damage, but then there's also the Prime, right? So there is ways in which Komic can just start pumping out this damage and win the game, but he does have to, like, have those turns ready. Pyroblast, 10 mana card, which is going to be one whole turn, going to be used to cast it. The Fireball has to fit in somewhere, and it won't fit in with the Prime either. So it's a clunky setup, but one I think he does have to go for because he's very desperate right now.
Yeah, and this board is reasonably difficult for Dravo to deal with, so the Broomstick actually ends up being very clutch here to help clean up these minions and make sure there's no additional minion damage. That ends up going straight to Dravo's health total.
I just realized, how do you think Dravo's going to protect this young Dragonhawk because he has Zephyrus from a potential Wind Fury lethals here?
I mean, that would be fun, but I don't think it's a high priority, unfortunately. It's too bad, like, Zephyrus can't keep cards like Dino Size.
Making plays to win games instead of to entertain me, Dan. I'm disappointed, honestly.
We all are, quite frankly.
Okay.
Finds Evocation. Okay.
Nova from the evocation already. It's not too shabby at all. Looks like he doesn't particularly need it now because the rest of his prime actually cleared off a good chunk of the board as well as get those mirror image, but the Nova could have been pretty clutch if that wasn't the case.
Jeez. 2 side quests, 3 secrets, 2 mirror images, and a prime. I mean, this looks very much... it reminds me of the Mysterious Challenger days. Comic has a bunch of annoying things, but no actual real bite outside of the Solarian. The fact that the Solarian's behind 0-2 taunts is probably the most annoying thing for Dravo right now. And if Counterspell truly is up, that would make that Zephyrus, if Dravo just plays Zephyrus, he'll be offered one spell to remove, and if he doesn't sequence it correctly, he's going to get Counterspell block. So I think from this position, he might have to play Breath of the Infinite and then Zephyrus to clear.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's if he wants to kill the Prime this turn, that is what he'll go for, because otherwise you are risking it a little bit.
It doesn't seem like he's going to. However, this gives a small window of Comic to slide in there because... Oh, wow. I thought he had, chargers for a second. I'm just seeing the evasive for him. But, of course, it's just Rush. But it gives him a small window of opportunity to potentially win this.
It's one rather large board, isn't it? And you've got to think now as well, in a bit of a tough way, he can't cast Breath of the Infinite to test for the secret and then say Zephyrus Twisting Nether this turn. So he'll have to Breath first and then go for a Brawl, potentially, instead, if he wants to clear. And he pretty much has to clear at this point.
He has to clear, and if any minion with attack survives, Comic has damage to close out the game. He's got 16 in hand, and Dravo's at 21. So any minion that survives... Oh, Shadow Ruin.
Yeah, honestly, for some reason, I thought he had a 4-attack minion on the board as well, so I didn't think Ruin was going to be good, but of course, Shadow Word Ruin being the pick there from Zephyrus, absolutely huge. The side quest coming out as well, going to give him that 6/6 to help out, just secure some of this board, and I think the game plan becomes very straightforward now for Comic. He needs to play this Nosdormu, probably go for Conjurers, next turn Pyro, turn after Fireball Ping, or, whichever order he wants to go for.
Yep, that's our bad. Of course, Dravo had the situation under control, but still not entirely clear skies here for Dravo. It's very close still.
That makes it a lot better, though, right? You can just Kronks for 5 AoE and then trade the 6/6 in.
Yeah, that's probably the line that Dravo immediately spots. There's also the opportunity to maybe figure out if you can... I guess fatigue counters, right? Like if you trade and then you just play Kronks to deal 5, can your opponent kill you and then you get a guaranteed lethal the following turn? I think the secrets introduce some roadblocks there.
Yeah, what Dravo will be thinking about really now is what are those 2 spells? Because I think he knows about the Conjurers, but what are those 2 generated spells and how often do they kill him? And what does he need to do? Because one thing we can see obviously, Dan, is that Kronks heal might be a real factor in this game actually because of how much just raw burn damage Comic's got.
Yeah. Actually, this is pretty smart from Dravo, kind of recognizing that it's very close to unlikely.
That trade was so sick.
Yeah, it was good. Comic has the Pyroblast, but he's short by just a little bit of damage. Doesn't have the double Fireball.
Actually really good. Because what he did there was, with the trade, he has more than enough damage minion-based on board to finish this. And it made Comic have to have just so much extra damage with only 2 cards available to him. It is just not going to be enough.
I mean, it was close. If Comic had another Fireball, if he found Gromish Hellscream off of his Conjurer's Calling... Well, I guess he couldn't have gotten that since Nosdormu isn't an 8-drop, it's a 4-drop.
Yep.
But, some of these decisions end up being super tight, and Dravo being just a couple of points off ends up making it very tightly contested back and forth. Dravo's going to take game number 2 and go to a 2-0 lead.
Yeah, really, really impressive performance, actually. I think Dravo kept his cool throughout that whole game. We did see Comic go for a slightly slower approach to the matchup, but Dravo, even with that Flame Ward went down, didn't rush anything, didn't try and trade in and then rebuild the board. Was like, well, if you've not got any minions and you're waiting for me to hit you in the face to play things, I just won't do it. And then you don't play, I don't play. Priest can draw more cards and probably win in the long run. So pretty good execution there from Dravo and good game, just game knowledge in general. But Comic's not out of it yet. This is best of 5. Even though Dravo is 2-0 up, he is going to be going over to his Druid as his final deck.
Yep, and so Druid versus the Priest. This is a pretty explosive one if the Druid can get the ramp, but Dravo is going to need a little bit of help. Comic keeping the Cabal Acolyte and the Wave of Apathy right now, which is pretty important if you really want to be able to have options against cards like Twilight Runner in the mid game.
And Dravo bringing a pretty interesting spell druid list here, honestly, because he has 1 Animated Broomstick, 1 Nature Studies, 1 Living Dragon Breath, 1 Wild Growth, which is standard, but then like 1 Anubisath Defender as well. So there's just a lot of one-offs, even the 1 Survival of the Fittest at the very top. So do you like this kind of splashing across multiple options, or do you prefer, Dan, some of the lists that are more, just two brooms, 0 Nature Studies, and so on?
I think in tournament environments, one-ofs are a lot better versus ladder, because in ladder you'll start to see the long-term effects of that, and tournament having like one-ofs sometimes ends up being situationally like exactly what you need. So I think I'm okay with that. I'm a little bit more partial to Broomstick because I want to draw one of them. They seem to be really important. The second Broomstick seems to be a lot less important, only because usually you need one to have like the board commandingly, and then you can win from there. So I think it's okay. I don't really have a strong opinion about it.
Okay. Yeah, and I do agree with the Broomstick, right? It's a lot of the time outside of course, the big Mount Seller turns. For me, it's like the bad game, but turn 6 against aggro, like Lake Thresher Broomstick turn, which can then flip the board in your favor. Or it's the same, but with the Twilight Runner to draw some cards. Like, they feel very, very impactful to me in some of those games. But yeah, Dravo not having access to the ramp means he's going to have to take this game just a little bit slower. His Comic is going to have a little look-see at Dravo's hand right now, at least some of it.
Yeah, so CZ, Mount Seller, Thresher, and Crystal Power, so, nothing too out of the ordinary. I think Comic really wanted Overgrowth. When you play the Madame Lazul, you're often anticipating your opponent on turn 4 to play ramp, and then you can play ramp right back. And that's a really important dynamic because Priest removal does line up with Druid really well. The big issue is when Druid gets too far ahead in the ramp, and therefore you get outpaced. Like, Soul Mirror isn't playable, but your opponent's playing like these giant exotic Mount Seller boards or Twilight Runner plus whatever. Oh my gosh!
Off the top.
What a pickup off the top for Dravo.
Literally changed the whole game right now. What I was about to say was a point of Dravo not having ramp, so what does his next couple of turns look like? Doesn't matter, Dan. You got the ramp. It's fine. And Comic now going for that Crystal Power. Bit of a surprise for me. I think I was looking at the Thresher because it's so awkward for the your opponent to actually kill off with that 6 health. But yeah, just go for the more flexible tool in the form of that Crystal Power. See if it pays off for him in the future.
Yeah, that is certainly something to talk about, right? If you know you're going to play Guardian Animals the next turn, it's not awful to have targets on the board for you to rush into, especially if you have 2 Twilight Runners come out, which is actually even more likely than usual, given that you have 2 Threshers in the hand. Dravo would want to have 2 targets to rush into in order to draw 4 cards. Maybe in his mind, he doesn't want to have all of them draw immediately, but I generally want to capitalize because Priest will find removal tools to deal with Twilight Runners if you leave them in stealth. Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting call to use Crystal Power, on top of the reasons you mentioned, which is comboing with exotic Mount Seller.
Comic just going to take it fairly slow. He does have the Cabal Acolyte along with that Wave of Apathy to steal any sort of pre-set up minions if the Guardian Animals isn't there. But we can see it is, of course, for now. Comic's gonna have to work his way on how to deal with this.
So it all worked out. Dravo didn't find the second Twilight Runner. And again, this is like a really small thing, and maybe in Dravo's mind, he really wanted to control the state of the board so that way he didn't lose too much tempo, or if Comic, had opportunities to buff his minions. Because if you look at Comic's deck list, it's not the Highlander Priest at all. It's more the Control Priest without Galakron that tries to play, a lot of tempo styles. Oh, and he steals the Twilight Runner off of the Cabal Acolyte and the Wave of Apathy combination, which is just huge to help him dig even deeper into the deck and find more removal tools. The downside is that, he doesn't exactly have a super strong board, and Druid can end up dealing with this board pretty easily if he just hero powers down the Twilight Guard, for example.
If you can get through it, though, right? There is a turn of time because the Teacher's Pet is going to stick at 1 attack for now. But you do see the difference, right, with this Cabal Acolyte nerf from 6 health to 4. It is so much... Its effect is still very powerful, but it is so much more killable by so many different decks now, right, at 4 health. It is just way easier to manage on the opponent's side of the board.
What to do?
Does he just commit a
Dravo
Brood
going
here?
for Lake Thresher, implying that he wants the Lake Thresher and the animated Broomstick. I was thinking about the possibility of Speaker Gidra and Overflow this turn. Because you'd be able to trade the Teacher's Pet into the Twilight Runner and then have a really imposing board. And then the best part is you get to save the Broomstick because it's, as you mentioned, Dravo only has 1 Broomstick in his deck. And I consider that to be a pretty important card to keep with the Mount Seller. Not to mention that he would also have additional mana crystals. So if he played Speaker Gidra and Overflow, he would have the mana to actually play, or he would have 10 crystals so that Wild Growth actually draws a card, which makes Mount Seller even better. So there's definitely some dynamics here that Dravo's valuing more than just convenient ramp. He's trying to disrupt, I guess, the Priest gameplay here. Maybe because he doesn't trust the fact that Comic has so many removal tools and AoE and tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, I think the key point here for me is going into the Priest turn 6. Although his board looked very weak to Soul Mirror, well, guess what? They're on 6 mana. Soul Mirror is not going to happen. So this sets up a very strong board for Dravo that can deal with almost anything Comic's going to play on 6 mana. Because this Thresher will probably just solo most of the boards that he can make outside of heavy removal turns. And honestly, I like the Broom there because if you can use the Broom earlier to push Priest off the board, you won't need the Broom later to push Priest off the board, right? Because it's already been done, the job's been kicked off. So I do think I do like the Broom play, and even now just having this Cobra stick is not a bad thing at all. And maybe now, having seen that, it is the Mount Seller turn, which is normally very susceptible, very strong against the Soul Mirror, as the attacks and health can vary quite a lot.
Yeah, and I don't really want to beat the drum too hard here, but Dravo having 10 mana crystals and being able to use the exotic Mount Seller and Wild Growth here is exactly kind of the situation we're talking about. And it just so happened to pan out kind of similar to what we were discussing. So it's easy for us to use that hindsight bias, but I imagine that Dravo wanted a much more powerful turn than just playing Teacher's Pet, because the point of ramp is to capitalize on all these mana crystals. If you just play 5 mana and hero power, you're playing at the same exact pace that you would have if you didn't have ramp. So this is definitely one of the situations that Comic needs to capitalize upon because of a slow turn from Dravo.
And that's another Twilight Runner for Comic, at least he has access to in this game, which is scary. Priest is a pain to deal with when it draws at the relatively slow rate that Priest does draw cards. If you give them Twilight Runners, it's just unfair. Comic's hand is so large right now, and it's only going to get bigger as time goes on. It's a little bit scary for Dravo, but again, Comic can't really make much of a board, right? He is still losing on the tempo game plan, and it only takes 1 or 2 more turns of this, or specifically a Survival of the Fittest draw, to just basically burst Comic out of the game if Dravo continues to be winning on board and sticking minion.
Yeah, Comic seems to be pretty indecisive. Even that previous turn where he chose to play a Pyromancer and then at the end use Crystal Power instead of just his Breath of the Infinite. it seems like he's kind of stuck between a place where like maybe he wants to develop a little bit, maybe he just wants to remove, and he chooses like a halfway point where he leaves up a minion, leaves up 2 minions, but develops his Mind Flayer and hopes that that's enough to bring him back onto the board. And I don't know if that's enough, right? Because now Dravo has gotten a lot of information about the lack of removal tools that Comic has, or at least the kind of the impression that he has that.
Right.
And Comic does actually have like Pyromancer, Breath of the Infinite, but is that enough to take down a board with a ton of health, leading up to things like Survival of the Fittest?
That's it, isn't it? It's that was by no means a good feeling turn there from Comic, and maybe that was the best turn he could make. The Kaj does help a lot. I do like the Kaj because what Comic needs to do is stick a minion somehow, so then he can benefit from Apotheosis, this Grave Ruin, etc. He can actually get something done. But right now, Dravo's doing a fantastic job of just pushing Comic off board, and basically Comic has to clear this board every single turn now, or he could just die. He's only on 23. And Survival of the Fittest on even half this board is looking very, very scary for him indeed. He really is just missing a Soul Mirror.
Yeah, Soul Mirror would do wonders to help the board state. And, I mean, Dravo is just running away with the board state here. And Comic does have AoE. He's got, you mentioned the Wild Pyromancer, the Breath of the Infinite. Apotheosis also has a fun dynamic with Wild Pyromancer. Every single damage point that Wild Pyromancer does on the board, you also gain life. So that's a lot of life gain if he plays 2 spells with Pyromancer, Apotheosis, and Shadow Word Death.
Right.
Which looks pretty good. I think that should clear off almost everything. Except the Mount Cellar, interestingly enough, which is very annoying.
Well, that's it. That's the issue, right? The death either goes on the Mount Cellar or the pet. And I think generally you'd aim it at the Mount Cellar, but it means that the Kaj kind of does nothing, right? Because it can't actually get a good trade in.
Yeah, I think just counting up this mana. Wild Pyromancer is 2, Apotheosis is 5, and then Shadow Word Death is 7. That leaves him enough mana to play Radiance at the very end.
There's also the point that if he uses Death on the Teacher's Pet, then he can't. After seeing that turn from Dravo, Comic might just expect Dravo to just not have that many more spells to follow up with, right? He saw 2 0-mana spells and something else, I think. So maybe he could have thought that that was just enough anyway, because now he's still leaving 10 power on the board that he can't do anything about with this card. I think, did he even go for the trade then? It looked like he went for the trade at the last minute. Yeah, there you go. He could have popped his Kaj as well then, because he would have got a Teacher's Pet, which is in the Kaj to actually defend as a taunt minion versus some of this.
Yeah, I think I like, because if he played the Wild Pyromancer and the Apotheosis, he would have had a very similar board state, but he would have had a Pyromancer on the board that has lifesteal, and he'd be at much higher life. And it's also kind of a situation where Dravo would feel somewhat obligated to trade into the minion. Instead, right now, it feels like he has almost no option anymore here. And like having cards like Twilight Runner be stuck in the hand also is limiting for him, and doesn't even have a way to combo with Cabal Acolyte. This is looking like Dravo has this right now.
It is. Comic definitely wanted to trade last turn. He's going to do it now, obviously. And then he does have Grave Ruin Apotheosis, though. So that will help. There are now... that Teacher's Pet, when it dies, is going to spit out not only the Beast, but also 2 more Teacher's Pet. And he's not going to go for the Apotheosis. Does surprise me a little bit.
Yeah.
With Wind Fury, this is just enough, right?
Well, the Teacher's Pet, if it spawns taunt minions... it's a little bit harder for Dravo to get through.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll see. Is the answer to that? But there might be.
And he only needs 1 of these minions to hit face, right? He does have mana also for a hero power. There's something weaker he has to jump through, but let's find out. That is not a taunt, and that is not a taunt. That is a 3-0 win there for Dravo. And honestly, I'll say, I think Dravo, in the games this series we watched, played pretty well, and Comic, I think, did just lose it a little bit towards the end, especially in that game. You could see the indecision. I think, especially with the emote back up there, it was definitely a mistake not to get that trade in, to get the taunt in before the Survival of the Fittest came down. that he took, 18 damage that turn when he could have took 9, which would have been a pretty big deal. So yeah, I do think Comic definitely got punished for some sloppy play, quite honestly.
Well, overall, it's a tough position, right? Like, both you and I have competed in the past, not to the extent as these players have, but, sometimes in those situations, you feel like you're doomed to lose anyways, and your mind just kind of wanders, and the road starts burning. You're like, I gotta do something. Because you can't think of a solution long-term. And I think overall, Komic's macro line, like, he understood that he was in a bad spot. But at the end of the round, Dravo is 6-0, undefeated. Player that definitely to keep an eye out for, given that we'll have 1 or 2 players that are going to be dominant over the rest of people in their records. Lightning, Dardar Binks, Lambie series, who we saw earlier in this round, and Alpay are going to round out your undefeated players. But of course, we're marching closer to find out who's going to be in our top 8. And so it's more than just those who are, perfect in score. It's about who can also bring up that rear and stay consistent enough for the last few rounds of Swiss.
Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of fighting still to go on for those top 8 spots, and it's going to go on for the rest of the day as well. We are done with our round number 6, but we've got round number 7 coming right up, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Masters Tour Montreal Online is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network. T-Mobile.